Good evening, every pony, and welcome to The Writer's Block, the show where I steal away a writer from the Brony fandom for an hour or two, and we talk about life, the universe, and everything, but mostly just general writing stuff within the fandom. My guest tonight is someone whose fanfics were some of the very first that I read when I first joined the Brony fandom. He's an old veteran of writing fanfics, having written a total of 65, I believe, on fanfiction to date, covering a multitude of genres, from tragedies to shipfics to comedies. He's a wonderfully talented fellow, and he goes by the name of Rated Ponystar. My friend, how the devil are you?
Hi there.
Alrighty then, I guess we'll just get straight down to the biscuits. So, I guess kind of first question that's probably the most important to ask anybody who writes a lot of stories such as yourself. How did you fall into the whole writing gig? Was this sort of a thing that you recently fell into, like since the fandom started, or was it more so when you were a lot younger you sort of had a knack for writing stories?
Well, when I was younger, I always liked to read books a lot. I only had like very few friends, and most of my friends tend to be books. I read a lot when I was a kid, and eventually that reading turned into writing. I actually started writing fanfiction when I was 13 years old, actually. I'm 27 right now, so that means I've been doing this for like 14 years now.
Gee, impressive record. In that case, what was the first kind of fanfics that you wrote? Like, did you write for any other fandoms before Brony took off?
I was a bit into the Digimon thing, as well as different sort of crossovers. I've done Land Before Time. I've done some Pokemon. I've done some Super Sentai. I was a huge fan of that when I was a teenager. And I kind of like have different names and different fandoms. I tend to keep those secretive though, because I don't like crossing my fandoms over most of the time.
Oh, of course.
It kind of complicates things and such. And some fandoms do not get along with other fandoms.
Unfortunately, so we've seen. Actually, on the topic of you sort of dabbling in Digimon stuff, a friend of mine who co-writes a lot of the episodes of EmeraldComet with me, he introduced me to a Digimon series called the Tamers Forever series. Have you read that at all?
I have. It's actually one of the more famous Digimon fanfics out there. The Tamers Forever is, I think, on probably the top 15 of the most well-known in Digimon fandom. It's very good, especially if you're a Tamers fan like I am. And
absolutely.
Especially if you're a Takata fan. It's got a lot of great writing, a lot of great characters, a lot of great drama. It is really good stuff. And I do recommend, if you're a Digimon fan, to read it and enjoy it. I
second that recommendation. It's an absolutely fantastic fanfic. One day, I suppose, if I want to branch out into reviewing other fanfics, I may do that. That's something to look forward to. I guess then, since you've been at this for so many years, who were your main inspirations then, book-wise? Like, do you try and base your style off a specific author or authors, or was there a series that really influenced your work?
I guess if there were any sort of inspirations, there would be the Redwall series, Harry Potter, obviously, some Lord of the Rings. I also liked Charles Dickens' work and Mark Twain's work. I also was really inspired by The Count of Monte Cristo, Three Musketeers. A lot of the old novels were kind of my favorite, those heroic, dashing ones of heroes and such. And over time, I just developed more of a darker style in a lot of my writing.
I noticed actually very recently you, this might have just been through Skype, or it might have been something on Fanfiction, I forget where, but you said that you were involved in a game recently? Was that like scripting for it, or was it the coding aspect?
Well, one thing that a lot of people don't know is that my actual profession, I guess you can say, is I'm an independent game designer at the moment, trying to go into professional, like getting hired by a company. For the past 2 years, me and the group that I've been part of Maniacal Game have been working on this rail shooter-like classic game called Screaming Eagles. It's available on Steam. That's Screaming Eagles for like $7.99. I was actually part of the writing team, the mission designing team, and I QA tested the game. So it's been an enjoyable ride. I've met a lot of great people doing it. They've inspired me to do better. I've inspired them to do better. And we really hope that this game can help us in our future careers and such.
That's awesome, and I wish you all the best of luck on that. I guess that kind of leads me then into kind of another off-the-cuff question. Do you have ideas then for a story for a professional video game that you'd like to make at some stage?
There's a couple, but the thing about the video gaming industry is that ideas are really a dime a dozen. It's more about selling the game to the higher-ups, making sure you got great gameplay, a great team, and a great strategy overall. So there's plenty of story ideas. It's just which ones you can actually push forward, which ones that people are on board with doing funding and doing all the minor work and such in order to make sure it can become a reality. That's the real hard stuff. And probably a few of those ideas I would like to try if I ever get into the position to doing so. But for now, they're on the bookshelves at the moment. I'm putting whatever data I have in them to store, and eventually, hopefully, one day I'll be able to use them.
I know, because I've started university actually very recently myself, and I've heard that a few other people do this. Do you have, like, either a little document or a small, like, page where you just write down just reams and reams of ideas to store for a later date?
I've got books of those. I've got tons of books of those. One thing you'll never find me short of is ideas. I've given ideas to people, both in writing and in gaming. I've sometimes just suggested ideas out of the blue. I've sometimes given people practices and such. It's just, I like giving ideas out, and whether I get full credit or not, it really doesn't matter to me, because to me, I like just seeing the idea itself come to life. To me, it's like the ultimate. Yeah,
you did that for me, actually, a little recently, when we were just sort of discussing first, through Skype, like just kind of giving me a bit of direction on some idea that I might do for a fic idea that I had at one point, which was it was very kind of you.
Thank you. It's I just like helping fellow writers write, seeing ideas come to fruition and such. Of course, the credit always goes to the person who actually writes it. So really, the person, if you ever do that story or the suggestions, the person who really deserves the credit, of course, will be you, because you actually wrote it.
Well, thank you very much. I guess that that'll lead me nicely then into this. Since you enjoy giving out ideas then to other people within the fandom, are there any stories that have been published on FimFiction that you've given maybe the initial idea for, or you've helped some other writers to bring the idea to fruition? There's
a couple of them, actually. Some from Black Hailstorm, and others. Some even I've commissioned to writers to do. But yeah, there's a couple of them that are out there. You'll find one of them was actually recently adopted. One of my favorite ones actually is done by Darthling22. It was an idea I posted for adoption called Raising Spike, and that's one of my favorite ones. As well as there's another one by, I hope I spelled the name right, Bachamate, called The Sun Won't Come Home. That was also another adoption that he did and completed, and I do recommend people checking those out. Not only are they done by some great writers and friends, but they're really good. They're really good ideas that I was proud to help inspire.
All right, excellent. For the people who aren't that very familiar with your work, some might know you through the story that you help write for, which is on DeviantArt. It's a series called Adapting to the Night.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to explain it, or like, you're the guy who wrote it, so do you want to just like give the audience just a quick rundown on what Adapting to the Night is, and then I'll ask you some stuff about that.
Sure thing. Adapting to Night is a comic that I originally just pitched as a single idea with Draw Ponies, where I basically showed my idea of the whole vampire vinyl thing. I just saw it so much in fandoms and such, I decided to get my shot at it. But it grew so popular that eventually it became a full-blown series, and I started getting ideas, and I've been working with my artist, Terminus Lupus, also known as Gray, and for about a few years now, that comic has been going strong. We've got a good following, and there's a lot of ideas I still need to put out for it, and it's got action, comedy, seriousness, drama, and I even inspired people to try their own hand at trying to create ideas based on that universe. I actually created a world guide for anybody who wants to take the ideas of that universe that I created and make it for their own, be it for fan fiction, comics, art, or whatever. Because one of the things I like doing is letting the worlds I create be inspiring for other people to create their own stories and such. But yeah, that's the overall comic, the adventures of Vinyl as a vampire, her past, and the circumstances she gets into, both with other vampires and non-vampires.
Yeah, still ongoing at the moment. If anybody wants to go see it, it's a very enjoyable series. It's only about 3 panels, for each page, but yeah, all very well done. It's funny actually that you say that you sort of kind of then created your own little universe within I guess, fanfic that now people are starting to attach to, and like just like the one thing I can think of was, wow, he pulled a K-Cat. Like with like kind of like similar to Fallout Equestria, I guess. But yeah, I guess this is probably a very dumb question because the answer will probably be no. But like, did you expect it to like get the following that it did? But and are you glad?
I'm glad it got the following that it did, and I'm glad it's success. But because of the success, I decided to expand the story that I originally had envisioned. It was never supposed to go this long originally, but as it got more and more popular, I started getting more enthusiastic, and there was more ideas to come, and I decided to expand the story itself.
Excellent. Yeah, it's really good. So, as I said at the start, you've got about 65 stories on your FimFiction, last I checked. And all of them cover a massive range of genres. You've got tragedies on there, you've got some brief, like, a one-shot that I saw of a human in Equestria story, some shipfics. One fanfic that people might know you from, is the story Treating Her Right. There's a couple audio adaptations of that out there. Do you think it's important then to like have a lot of variety in the stuff that you do write? Do you not like to confine yourself to one genre?
I personally just like writing whatever I like to write. Some people are comfortable with one or two specific genres. Some people are comfortable doing a multitude of them. I guess I'm more of the latter. I just do whatever story I think works right. Like, if it's human in Equestria, tragedy, romance, if I want a specific lesson to be taught, if I want to give a certain theme or a certain emotion, then I'll definitely write it. To me, there's no limit to what you can and can't write. Whether you're good or not at it is based on your own personal judgment and the outcome of the writing, of course. Like, my most unpopular fics, my most unpopular fic, the one that I actually think is kind of a failure, was the one where was actually a commission. It was the one where I tried to do a sort of a futuristic fic with, like, the main cast being married, having children and all that. And there's a lot of stories like that. That's kind of the genre of its own, like the next generation story. I wasn't very good. I tried that, wasn't very good, and I kind of canceled the story because I didn't like where it was going. I didn't like what I created. So that was just one lesson to be learned, of course. And then, but other genres, I was surprised to learn that I actually liked doing. Like, one would be negotiation series. I'm still shocked by how popular that got. The negotiation series was originally just going to be that one fanfic, Negotiations.
I've actually read that one. Yeah, that was the post-Human and Pony War, right?
Yeah, it was based on the Conversion Bureau, and I've always been a sort of an anti-Conversion Bureau, pro-humanity kind of guy, and I figured, you know what, why not just give it a shot? And probably be good for laughs. It got so popular, and eventually I found I had a real liking for it.
Yeah. Does that happen to you often? Like, you kind of write something that, you sort of put it out there, and then you forget about it for a little while, but then because of the reception, you sort of get, I guess, invigorated to maybe expand on it a little bit more? Maybe a one-shot then turns into a multiple-chapter story?
That happens to me a lot, not just in this fandom, but in other fandoms as well. And sometimes it works. Sometimes I like doing that. Other times I sometimes regret it because it kind of like I kind of find myself needing to like fix a few things in my mind, and there's always the have to plan ahead sort of part. But often it's always more rewarding than it is frustrating. In most of the time.
Of course, yeah. Since you kind of like you sort of have the same approach towards a lot of writing that I kind of find myself. That I tend to have quite a bit of the time, which is just to sort of write sort of whatever you think of and whatever you think will make for a good story idea. But is there a certain topic or a certain theme that you particularly like to cover in your stories?
There's a couple. One of them is that in pony fanfiction, there's actually a couple. One is I'm very pro-human. If there's ever a story with any sort of human that I write, it's always going to be pro-humanity, like humanity in its best moments. I won't shy away from the negative aspects of humanity, but as a person who has a lot of faith in mankind in general, despite what we go through, I always like to write the best of humanity when I can in characters.
That's refreshing to see that, if I must say. It's a refreshing thing to see that, because like in a lot of stuff that I read, I tend to see that we get kind of a bad rep within within the stories that are maybe human in Equestria and that kind of thing. But it's nice to see that like you like to play kind of both sides, I guess. You take the good with the bad, and kind of portray all your human characters in a a very, for lack of a better term, a very human light.
Yeah, I do the same thing with pony characters too. To me, sentient species are, if there are other sentient species out there, I'm pretty sure they're going to be just like us.
Oh, probably, yeah.
Another thing I like to do is deconstruct certain aspects of Equestria. I don't consider celestial or Luna gods. I sort of make them do mistakes and such. The Assassination of Twilight Sparkle series is a perfect example, as well as the Negotiation Verse series. I like to sort of deconstruct the Equestrian society itself, sort of show things that may or may not actually be real, but it sort of can give that image. Like in one of my in the Assassination series, it's a law that you can't have a job that doesn't attain to your cutie mark or special talent, which sort of gives off a sense of a caste system in a way. Like you're being denied what you want to do, and you're sort of being forced to do what you want. Now, some people like getting jobs, of course, in real life that obtain to their talent, but some people like to have their talent as a hobby or just something off the side and want to do something completely different. But in my version of Equestria, you can't do that. And that's kind of a bit unfair, I think, and a bit fascist. But also speaking, however, in lighter terms, I'm a huge fan of plot jokes. I think a lot of people are. I've written a couple of stories that feature a lot of centered on the plot. The biggest one would be Rainbow Dash wears panties. I really love that one. I read that at least once a month. It's one of my favorite humor things that I've written. And the other thing is I'm a big fan of death humor. It's one of my ways of dealing with tragedy is that I like to take death and give it a humoristic approach. Almost everybody who really knows me knows I have this sort of obsession with doing that, and I've definitely done one or two commissions with that. But yeah, I'm a big fan of death humor, or black humor in general.
Do you read...
Black comedy, sorry.
No, you're okay. You've just actually reminded me of just, like, some books that my dad has lying around the house. Did you read the Discworld series at all? And, like, Terry Pratchett's interpretation of death as a character in that? Is that, like, kind of a little bit of a source of inspiration, or is this just a coincidence?
That's just a coincidence. I've never read the Discworld, but I've always wanted to do so. I've heard great things about it, and there's a lot of series, however, I've always wanted to read and such. But no, I've never read Discworld. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how many people ask if I've gotten inspiration from such and such, but I honestly have never gotten or even heard of some of these things.
No, I know that feeling all too well. I find it kind of ironic, just a bit on a personal note, how like I'm a guy who reviews fan fiction, and yet it takes me so long under normal circumstances to finish reading a normal novel. Like I have To Kill a Mockingbird in my room, which is only like it's about 300 pages or so. It took me 9 months to get through it, and I have The Green Mile on the go at the moment. That's probably going to take me just as long, and I bought it today, and God knows how long that's going to take me. But yeah, I mean, like just like a little just true fun fact there, I guess. Do you enjoy helping out new writers? Like, say, just somebody who hasn't written anything yet, they stumble across your work and they kind of come to you, asking, like, for either tricks of the trade or tips and that kind of thing. I know, but you said that you give out ideas, but do you enjoy giving a leg up to people who are new to the fanfic scene?
I do. Like, there was actually, most of the time I give them a link to a set of suggestions I gave when I was new to new people as well. It's about things like have an iron body when you deal with criticism. Always keep on trying your best. Read, be inspired. Listen to editors, things like that. I always give that list if they want hints or what's the best thing I can do as a writer. When it comes to things like can you read my story? Can you edit my story? Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I don't. It really depends on how busy I am, because I sometimes help others with their stories, or I'm collaborating with others with their stories, or I'm reading or pre-reading their stories and such, although I'm not the best pre-reader, to be honest. But yeah, I do my best to actually help out as many people. I do my best to help out at them if I can. As if it's something big or minor, depends on both my time, because real life's very busy for me at the moment, and also if there's something in advice that I can give them, because while I may be an okay writer, I'm not the best writer out there. I'll always state that. I can think of like 10 writers who are better than me at the moment.
I guess with that whole sort of like give them a link to some stuff that can help them out. Did you ever have sort of like a Mr. Miyagi kind of moment where one of those people that you gave tricks of the trade to went on to like write something that's quite well known, or that was a really good story that was liked by a lot of people?
If that has happened, I can't name it off the top of my head, and whether I got credit or not, that doesn't really matter to me, as long as I was able to help them in the end, and they help somebody else in the end, things like that. And like I said, I'm not really too much of the attention sort of seeker guy. I like my work being more famous than myself, but like if I was able to help somebody, whether it's someone I know or someone I don't personally know in writing or whatnot, then I'm happy that I managed to help them out and may have them find success.
Awesome, cool. What's your proudest work? What's the like the one fic that you can always sort of look back on and say, yeah, I'm really happy that I did that. This is like if they remember me in the fandom for something, I would like it to be this.
That would be my fanfic, Why Am I Crying? I consider that my best work, my favorite fanfic. Everything I wanted wrote in there, was wrote well. And honestly, to me, that's my best work ever as a writer, in general. Not just in the fandom, but in all fandoms.
I would actually agree with you on that one, because I'll give a little fun fact here about me. When I read that story, I read it at a time when like I was sort of dealing with my own sort of feelings about the topic of death, because basically, so the story centers around Diamond Tiara dies, and each of the three Cutie Mark Crusaders has a completely different reaction to her death, and it sort of goes through this idea of a child learning about death for the first time, and also learning that there's a reason why people bully other people, and maybe sort of overcoming the roadblocks that you might think of when you realize that your bully was in fact a person just like you. And it is also one of my favorite fics. I've made it a point actually, if I got maybe like for a subscriber milestone, I thought I might actually review the story and just really dive into why I like it so much. But yeah, that was honestly one of the fanfics that actually got that really got me into writing in general, because I just loved the way that you wrote it, and I thought that it brought to life something that I hadn't really seen done in fanfic, or maybe I just had to go looking a little harder. But I think the way you handled it, I thought was just like excellently written.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad it helped. Not just helped you, but I've also had people come and tell me that story helped them out as well with other issues, not just in writing, but also life issues, which was kind of the core aspect that I wrote that story. I wanted it to address and get people talking and thinking about issues of bullying, family, growing up, death. It's basically a coming-of-age story that I wrote, and honestly, it's the one story I actually do miss actually writing. It's the one story I miss writing the most, because that one I had like the most fun, the most dedication into writing, because I really felt a sort of muse with that story. People have asked me if I ever plan on making a sequel or something, and the answer is no.
No.
Perfect. Yeah, that story is perfect as it is, and to add, I did toy with the idea once, but I didn't even come up with a story plot, but I decided in the end not to do it, simply because it's just best on its own.
I don't really think it's a story that necessarily needs a sequel, just personally, because I think that the like what you wrote it about like just kind of fits perfectly into just one single narrative. Alright then, I guess in contrast to that last question of what's your proudest work, is there a story that you kind of look back on now, like either that commission that you talked about earlier or something else, and you kind of think to yourself, like, wow, what was I thinking? Like, I should have gone back and changed this or changed that. Do you get that a little bit with some stories that you write?
Yes. There's a few stories that I've written that I wish I could change back. One of my biggest disappointments was my first serious fanfic, Wings of Sacrifice. I redid that actually twice, and in the end, I felt like I ruined the story by doing that. I was trying to make it so... I was so focused on trying to make it an epic that I kind of just ruined the story that way. And it was a lesson for me to learn. The other story that I sometimes wish I could go back on, believe it or not, is my assassination of Twilight Sparkle.
Really? The first one?
Yes. I've always said, now, originally it was just going to be the first story, just the first one. But then this came to me, the idea that maybe I could actually make it into a series. And maybe I could emphasize and make it into an epic. Like, that was my hope. I wanted to always do an epic length story, and I thought this was the gateway to do that. And in some ways it works, and in some ways it doesn't. Like, that's probably my most divided story among people who read my stuff. Like, there's people who like a lot of the twists and chapters and themes I do, but a lot of people also point out plot failures, gaps in the story, things that characters should or shouldn't do. And I admit that those exist, and I do my best to try to fix them or try to deal with them. But I do admit that I could have actually made the story a little bit better than it is, and maybe fix up a few details. But I'm still proud of it, and that's one thing I always say. No matter what you write, whether it's good, bad, mediocre, or whatever, you should always be proud of what you write regardless, because every story helps you evolve as a writer, and especially the bad stories.
Oh, failure is a great teacher. There's a Beckett quote that I heard. I was watching, I think, an interview with, I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones, but it was Peter Dinklage, the guy who plays Tyrion Lannister on the show, and he quoted a thing from Samuel Beckett. It was, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. And I think, like, with a lot of stuff, especially in writing, I think that, you need to kind of fuck it up first before you get any better. Because the next question I was actually going to ask was, do you have you ever stumbled across like some old things that you wrote, like when you were, a young teenager, or maybe a kid, and ever have just the sudden urge to just throw it out the window and burn it?
Oh yes, every writer has their own dark secrets and such. The first honest-to-God fanfic that I ever wrote was when I was 13. Like I said, it was in Digimon. It was like a total Davis, godlike, OP character, and it was in this mystical world of dragons and like barely anything Digimon. I was borrowing sources from like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Yu-Gi-Oh, Final Fantasy. I was basing it off an author like called Galamon of the Hazard, and I was trying to be like him because I thought he was at the time the coolest author I ever met, and I tried doing that. If looking back now, it's a colossal failure of a fanfic, really, when you get down to it. It's like literally the perfect stereotype for a fanfic that you would think of.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like the OC with like the black and like multicolored hair color scheme going on.
or like the god tier character who could do no wrong, always gets the girl and things like that.
Yeah.
It was like that.
He sneezes and the bad guy dies, like that kind of thing.
No, I tried to make the villains as badass as I could, but I was like literally just copying from like so many sources. It didn't really feel like my fanfic when I looked back at it. You can't find it anymore. I actually deleted it a long time ago. Although I would be surprised if I know you say you can't delete everything from the internet, but I haven't found it. I've searched just for the sake of even just trying to riff it. Yeah,
we'd probably really need to go digging if we wanted to find something like that.
Yeah, that was like written in 2003. I stopped writing in 2005 or 6. That was during like the golden age of fanfiction.net.
What was that, like 13 years ago?
12 to 11, yeah.
Oh god, when I say it like that, I feel old.
I'm 27. I feel older than you. I feel old. Trust me. I just had my birthday like earlier this month.
Oh, same. Well, that's okay. We can be two crotchety old men together. It'll be fun. So you've said that like you have a kind of sort of books and books of ideas that you've sort of written down for stories. But has there ever been a moment where you haven't been able to write out clearly an idea that you had, or you were in the middle of writing a story and you kind of like lost the steam to write it that you might have had at the start?
I have. Some of them are fanfics I put up for adoptions or just given away because I couldn't actually do it. Some of them are MLP ones, some of them are Pokemon ones, some of them are Game of Thrones ones. I've always tried to do Game of Thrones, but I'm always too busy to do that. Some of them are Five Nights at Freddy's ones. There's a lot of ideas from a lot of genres that I've always wanted to do, and sometimes I've started, sometimes I've stopped, and sometimes I just give them away. If I figure to myself, if I can't have the drive to finish even the first basic chapter, then there's no point really in me actually trying to do the whole story, because the one thing I try to do is I try my best to utterly complete the stories that I write, and more often than not, sometimes I actually fail doing that, which I always feel guilty about when I lose steam. Although I do try to get back to those if I ever get the drive back, or I try to like adjust them or something. But yeah, that's happened more often than you may think.
On that note, actually, of Game of Thrones, and this may just be for like a niche part of the audience who are watching the interview, but have you kept up with the show recently, like through season 7?
Yes, I've kept up with the show. Definitely have. While I will admit with some people that season 7 was the weakest of all the seasons, it wasn't exactly that badly written or lazy or anything. It's definitely different now from the books, and maybe there are some spoilers from the books, but I still enjoyed it. I give it like maybe a 3.5 out of 5 stars this season.
Oh, no, I'd agree with that. I think that, because I was talking to a few of the people who were in my my film course about this today, is that a lot of the complaints that I see being directed towards it is that it's sort of lost that kind of political edge that it had when it started out in season 1 and carried on through up until about maybe season 4 and season 5 at a push. But a counter-argument that I also see to that is that it's now sort of, because, I guess this probably would be a spoiler, because the war is now basically at their doorstep, it's sort of gone past the political thing, and now that the war is front and center, it needs to sort of become the epic story that like it was kind of set up to be. What would be your reaction to, I guess, that argument?
No, I completely agree with that in the fact that, yes, we've been building up a lot of the political stuff with very little of the war effort. But the moment, I believe, the Balor Church, the Church of Great Balor, whatever it's called, the moment that blew up, that was like literally the barrel of gunpowder that finally ended any sort of sense of peace, negotiations, and pretty much at this point everybody was now knowing who everybody was and their characters and such. So now you have the dragons there, you have the armies, you have the war again, you have the armies of the dead literally now known to everybody. So there's no point in keeping up any sort of pretentiousness of politics or false bravado or whatever. It's now really just a moment of survival and fighting and trying to make sure that we don't end up as an entire world of a graveyard or something. The only person who still keeps up with the politics is just Cersei in her own mad, crazy, weird way, but this is because at this point Cersei has just gone completely nutso and is now just living her fantasy life of what she's always wanted.
Yeah, Cersei's basically now become the female version of Mad King Aerys at this stage, essentially.
Pretty much. That's actually the best analogy, which is why I actually personally still think that Jaime's going to be the one who kills her.
I would love for Jaime to be the one who kills her. It's like, I've heard so many people like talk about how the moment could possibly go down. I think it's like, I think one of the best sort of ideas that I heard, or just one that would be like the most amazing visually to see, would be that he just like slowly puts his hands around her throat while the sort of surrounding area of King's Landing with wildfire just kind of explodes around them and the two of them are engulfed. I mean, it would be like a little over the top, I think, but I think just if they played it a little slowly, not really in slow motion, but like kind of made it a bit more quiet and just like a very sort of slow, maybe little like strangely creepy moment, and then all of a sudden just fire. Just personally, I think that would be a pretty cool sight to see.
I thought it was going to be something more like they kiss and then he just shoves her off someplace or whatever before falling. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Of course, actually, there is an interesting death. I hope it would be a unique twist. In the last episode, where she announces that she's bringing Gold Company in. You remember that part?
Oh yeah, the Golden Company.
Now, books, Gold Company is secretly under the command or under the hiring of both John Cunningham and the Aegon Targaryen that nobody knows if is really the Aegon Targaryen that was killed, or thought to be killed, or just a murmur.
Young Griff.
It would be very late in the game to do this, but there would still be a twist if it turns out this is Aegon makes his appearance in the final season, and they take over King's Landing, and with John behind him, because I've always hated John Cunningham. They take over King's Landing, they kill Cersei, and they try to take care of both the North and the others at the same time, and then it becomes sort of like a dragon has three heads sort of thing.
Oh yeah, of course. I think that might be a thing that maybe will happen in the books. I think that in the series, it may be a bit too late in the game to just bring in young Griff that quickly into the story, and then just be like, and then there's this guy, and he kills Cersei, and then all of a sudden everything's okay. Just like, to me, that moment in the show would come off a little bit too out of nowhere. But the books, I can totally see that happening. I mean, we've got 2 more books to go through if George ever gets them done, please God.
I won't be surprised if he doesn't get them done, or if at least he'll just get one done and leave the end and he'll die before the last one, because he's already written in his will that his sons will never finish the books. They're supposed to remain untouched.
All right, yeah. I'll be sad if that happens, but here's hoping. Have you ever thought about professionally publishing a book?
I have. There's actually 2 ideas that I've been writing in for about 3 years now. Because my main goal in my life is to be a writer that sustains himself. Obviously, I can't do that in this day and age because, well, society and all. Mm-hmm. If this was the Renaissance era, I'd be living as a millionaire. But yeah, there are novel ideas that I do have, but I'm waiting till I have my own place, a full-time job, stability, before I actually focus on doing that. Because to me, that's the most important thing I have to do, and that's get some sort of stability in my life. I need a full-time job. I need a place where I live. Things like that. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. Totally agree with you. And I suppose, this is actually the last question that I have lined up. Once MLP inevitably ends, do you think that you'll carry on writing stories for the fandom for a little while, or do you think you'll sort of drift along on the wind to maybe another fandom and start producing fics there?
I'll probably stay in the fandom. There is going to be a point where I probably will stop doing the fan fiction for MLP, but I won't stop doing comics. I love doing the comics so much, I won't ever stop doing that. So if I ever stop being an MLP writer on fmfiction.net, at least people can see me on DA under my name, and they'll see Pony stuff constantly coming out.
All right, excellent. I'm actually out of questions. I think that's the full interview. We got a good 40 minutes out of that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really awesome. All right then, cool. Rated Ponystar, everybody. His work is on fmfiction.net. If you want to go check him out, I highly recommend him. He's a great guy. Got me into writing, so he must have been doing something right. Yeah. So thank you very much for coming on the Writer's Block.
Thank you, and thank you all for listening.
Mm-hmm. Alright then, folks, in that case, I will cut the interview here. He's been Rated Ponystar, I have been EmeraldComet, and I will see you all next time.